and we are very thrilled to welcome the leaders of She Changes Climate today. So wonderful to have them. So to give you a little preview of what's ahead, we are going to hear some introductory remarks from an amazing environmental leader, Hazel Wong. She's one of our board members, and she's going to tell you a little bit about Planet Women and the theme of the talk today, and She Changes Climate. And then she'll facilitate a conversation with three leaders from She Changes. We have Elise Buckle, Bianca Pitt, and Caroline Mair-Toby today. After that moderated conversation, we'll move into audience Q&A. So if you have questions as we go along, you can put them in the chat, or you can save them and I will call on you when it's time for Q&A and you can unmute yourself. So to kick things off, I have the pleasure of introducing Hazel Wong. Hazel is, like I said, we're lucky to have her on our board. She is also the Director of Global Conservation Campaigns for the Nature Conservancy. Under her tenure, the Nature Conservancy has generated more than $57 billion in public funding for natural resource conservation through ballot measures at state and local levels. So, wow. Not only that, her team has an 88% winning rate at the ballot box, a woman who is good to have on your side when it comes to conservation measures. She guest lectures at Yale University on conservation financing, and before the Nature Conservancy, she had a long career in politics and broadcast journalism. So she coordinated campaigns for the Nevada State Democratic Party. She was a producer and announcer on local TV and radio, so we are in good hands for the conversation today. She has a master's in political science from University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and a bachelor's in communications from Cal State University, Fullerton. She is also a native of the Seychelles, and she's been at the forefront of researching how to engage communities of color in conservation. And she's a fierce advocate for diversifying the conservation community. So it is my pleasure to welcome Hazel.
Joanna, thank you for that lovely and warm welcome. It is such an honor and pleasure to be here today to talk about how we can advocate for more diverse leadership for climate action. You know, a month from now, representatives from all over the world will gather in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, for the 27th UN Climate Conference, also known as COP27. I recently watched this amazing, powerful speech from the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, that she gave at COP26 last year. You know, in speaking about the impact of climate change to small island nations and frontline communities, she said, failure to provide critical financing for adaptation is measured in lives and livelihoods. Let that sink in. Lives and livelihoods, that is what's at stake. You know, many times in conservation and just like COP negotiations, you hear a lot of jargons, right? You hear a lot of numbers, SDGs, SDRs, 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius. But the truth is we must never, ever lose sight of the fact that the purpose and why we're all here is that we need to save lives on Earth. And the climate crisis is already affecting every single living thing on Earth. I mean, we are living climate change now, catastrophic fires, dangerous heat waves, floods, droughts, just to name a few. But the truth is, and the reality is that not everybody is feeling the impact of climate change to the same degree. And the truth is not everyone will feel that impact as well. Small island nations like the islands that I'm from, the Seychelles, they are at the front lines, but also we are at the mercy of the developed countries in order to act on climate. Add to that, women and children are also disproportionately affected by climate change. People facing socioeconomic equality. I think about Oregon, 30 extra degrees, right? The heat waves. A lot of people without air conditioning, a lot of people without money to be able to get out of town. These kinds of scenarios are going to play out. And we saw it across Europe this summer in the UK, right? All the heat waves. And so whether you're living in high income countries or low income countries, these impacts are real. And again, they will disproportionately affect the poor. And the vulnerable people are paying the price, and they're paying the price for a lack of for the developed countries failing to address this issue. But add to that, and this is why it's so wonderful to have She Changes Climate here. The voices of the communities, of the various different vulnerable communities are not being heard. Women, marginalized people, we're not equally represented in decision-making, or position of power when it comes to climate action, not at the COP, not in a lot of government agencies, federal, state, subnationals, or as leaders of the environmental organizations or foundations. And we absolutely need a paradigm shift. And that's why we're here today to have this conversation. And also why I'm super excited to be a part of Planet Women, because our vision is about a future that is vibrant and that is celebrates the diversity of life on Earth, but also celebrate and builds out leadership in the conservation movement that has more of a gender balance. We believe that diverse leadership and gender equity are essential and a must to address climate change, and that diverse voices are essential to innovate and succeed at every level of the environmental movement, from rural communities to governments. So how is it that we're going to do this with Planet Women? Two ways of looking at the world. We are seeding changes in the field by supporting women working at the grassroots level in Central Africa, in the Indies, Amazon, and in Southwestern United States. And the second one, which I alluded to a little while ago, we want to transform the culture of conservation. Our goal is to increase the number of diverse women that are in leadership position across environmental organizations, and to inspire the shift towards regenerative leadership, a type of leadership that is founded on decolonization, feminism, but also on systems thinking. So with that, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you. It is a pleasure to welcome She Changes Climate. I am so thrilled to host this sister organization, and much like Planet Women, She Changes Climate is also dedicated to increasing the power and influence of women on climate action, with the end goal of opening doors for all marginalized people. The folks at Planet Women, we have been so inspired by the wonderful work of She Changes Climate. We read about the letter that was sent to UK leaders calling for equal representation for women in COP26 in Glasgow, where more than 400 luminaries signed on to it. But unfortunately, while it sent a powerful message to the environmental community, not much progress was made on gender equity at that conference. But guess what? And you ladies know this, right? We keep coming back, we get knocked down, but we get up again. Somebody wrote a song about that. And they are here and they're back and fiercely campaigning for more diverse voices on climate leadership at COP27. And they've just sent another round of letters to UN leaders signed by 500 women and men, asking again for the equal gender representation. And they will tell us more about that in a little bit. We will hear more about, the challenges they face, but also really the hope that we have, right, for the outcomes that we're seeking. So I am excited to have the two co-founders of She Changes Climate Change, Bianca Pitt and Elise Buckle, and their Chief Empowerment Officer, Caroline Mair-Toby. And so with that, ladies, welcome. They will introduce themselves as I ask the first round of questions. And Bianca, let's start with you. I would like to ask you to tell us a bit more about yourself and how you came to She Climate Change. She Changes Climate.
It's quite a mouthful, I know. Thanks so much for this really great introduction, and thank you for welcoming us here today, and everyone here who is on the screen for registering and making the time available to listen to us. My background is a sort of law and business and corporate finance background. I then had my first child and wanted to take a little sabbatical to spend time with my girl, and that gave me the time to read up outside my immediate industry interest, which was the media world at the time. And the more I read, the more I became aware that we were really heading for self-destruction with 8 billion people on the planet and unsustainable operating systems. So I decided to go into the environmental sector and not back to my job in corporate finance, and joined the boards of various charities, Client Earth, the not-for-profit law firm, the Environmental Funders Network, which is the umbrella organization for environmental funders, charities and foundations in the UK, Action for Conservation, which is a youth charity that looks at making young people ambassadors for conservation, and the Sustainable Angle, which is a charity that looks at revolutionizing the fashion industry and making them more sustainable. And I spent the next decade looking at who was doing what worldwide, connecting people to each other, seeing what we had to fund, my husband and I, in terms of accelerating the transition, and looking also at where the barriers lay for climate action. And you know, I'm sure, like all of you, I was absolutely baffled how slow progress was, how, you know, there seemed to be just simply not that recognition within our own population of the severity of the crisis. And I had heard at the same time about, you know, more and more voices talking about climate justice, inequality. But I honestly have to say, I had big blinkers on. I just thought that we had to focus on the, in a sort of almost autistic way, I thought we had to focus on sorting out the environmental crisis now. And then once we've done that, we can focus on sorting out also the social issues. So I just simply didn't understand until October 2020 that actually these social inequalities were the reason for the environmental crisis. Now, I had set up a network of women called the Women of the Environment group. It's just an informal WhatsApp group, about 90 women around the world, founders, philanthropists, CEOs, and influencers. And that gave me some insight into how women thought, you know, the hopes, the frustrations. We were sharing news and projects about what we were doing, what we read, you know, and suddenly we weren't alone anymore. And I think that was an incredibly important thing for us all, because I think up to that point we had operated, I think a lot of us felt we were just quite alone in fighting this battle for all of humanity. And it was Antoinette who is listening and keeping very quiet, because she's actually the third co-founder of She Changes Climate. And I would in fact call her the initiator, because she saw that no woman had been appointed to the COP26 team. Now, I thought COP is a hopeless format anyway. We've had 26 of them, or up to around 25 of them. So a quarter of a century we've been having these COPs, and guess what? Emissions are still rising. So something's not working there. Let's not bother with it. But she said, no, absolutely not. We must make sure that women's perspectives are heard. If they are not part of the leadership team, we won't get the results that we all so badly need, not just for ourselves, not just for our children, but quite frankly, even for our work that is otherwise on environmental things, and completely focused on that. So she really, together we sort of came up with this name, She Changes Climate. And I also, and I think Antoinette will agree with, we both naively thought that we would speak to the government, the UK government. We will say, a slight mistake has occurred. Could you just please fix the team? And then everything will be done. We'll get back to our jobs and we'll be all happy again. And at the same time, we prepared this letter very much as a sort of stick in the background. If you don't follow through appointing new women, we'll go public with this letter. A campaigning measure. Now, up to this point, I'd never run a campaign. I had funded all sorts of things, but I certainly wasn't the one organizing it myself. And I have to say, I quite enjoyed the sort of strategic work behind the scenes, speaking to Alok Sharma, the president of COP26, also the CEO of COP26. But in all these conversations, it slowly dawned on me that, you know, if I thought I was backwards, well, my goodness, we were talking to people here who really didn't understand intersectionality, who mentioned he talked about women as if they were some sort of tiny minority, a sort of side group, a fringe group essentially. And that was really worrying, because clearly here, these people didn't understand that women made 51% of the world's population. And if they didn't understand that they weren't not only addressing this large stakeholder group, but also inviting this large stakeholder group into the decision-making for COP26, then we really had a problem. And that, to me, explained why the COPs had not yielded any results, and also why we need women to immediately make the changes that we need to see now in the next 3 years. As you see, I'm here 2 years later. As you say, Hazel, I feel sometimes a bit like a zombie that keeps on getting up and walking out of the grave. At the same time, it's hugely invigorating, particularly because I work with such amazing women. And I will pass on the word to Caroline first, because she joined us from Tobago. We talked about small islands. And then Elise, who really has the most COP experience here of us all.
Thank you.
Hi, hello. Well, I'm calling to you from Trinidad and Tobago, where there's actually a tropical wave going on, and not 10 minutes driving from me, there is a massive flood going on. So it's, it's interesting seeing we're supposed to be outside of the hurricane belt, but that's kind of shifting, and Trinidad is getting more and more tropical storms. So it's very interesting that we're talking about climate change while this is going on. So my name is Caroline Mair-Toby. I am a lawyer, international environmental law specialist. So I've been working on climate diplomacy, small islands, Indigenous peoples. I think Indigenous peoples came a little bit later, but working on these issues for about 15 years now, and from a post-colonial literary angle. That was my first degree. So I've kind of always taken that lens with me. I've been looking at the intersection of colonialism, empire, climate change, Indigenous issues, small islands, rights for a good while now. I cut my teeth in international law, so I started advising through various think tanks and NGOs. British Institute for International Comparative Law is where I started off, and then Foundation for International Environmental Law and Development field, and then Legal Response International. And we were advising at the UNFCCC negotiations on small islands and least developed countries. And so when I moved back to Trinidad, it was kind of hard to do that. I moved back to have my children, have my family, and not being in London kind of got in the way of being in international negotiations. So I started the Institute for Small Islands, and I started approaching Indigenous peoples purely from a climate change point of view, purely from I want your opinion and your voice out there. And it was very interesting. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. That's why I'm sounding so scratchy. And it was very interesting to hear, well, what do you want exactly? Like, what do you want to talk about? We have issues going on. We have our lands being taken from us. We have, trees being felled. We have Indigenous issues, like actual, there's a Maroon group that's fighting on recognition of indigeneity, and so they're like, what exactly do you want to talk about? And so that's when I was like, okay, I need to backpedal and really rethink how I'm going to go about this. And so I started to work on those issues with the Institute, and that's kind of what got me, I think, under the eye of Bianca, where we were working with the Maroons to amplify their voices on their own indigeneity, and asserting their own indigeneity, and working climate justice into it, and working rights and culture and spirituality into this whole beautiful argument. So She Changes Climate kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, do you want to join our network? And then from there on, we just kind of started talking and moving together, and that's how I joined them. So I think it's really important that this direction has been taken by She Changes Climate, and that we really want to give a voice, to amplify the voices, to give a platform where women from the global south, from the marginalized global south, in particular from local communities and indigenous peoples, to have a voice, to have a platform, to have a space to speak and speak to the world. What is your experience? What is going on? What are the issues of this? There's this topic, loss and damage. What does it mean? What does it break down to? Like, I can show you the video of that neighborhood being flooded out. The actual river is just taking a ride down the road, So houses are being flooded out. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what's going on in Cuba. We can't see it, but so we're seeing what's happening in Florida. Think of that, plus aging buildings, aging infrastructure, sewage where you can't flush toilet paper. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. This is just the bio, but hi, I'm Caroline Mair. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. All good, Caroline. Thank you. Elise?
Okay, I'm going to keep it really short because I know we also want to talk about COP, but first, congratulations. I love your initiative, Planet Woman. This is really a beautiful name because in a way, the first woman that we all have in our lives and in the lives of everyone living on this planet is Mother Earth. That's where we are born. That's where we will die. Mother Earth is providing food, water, fresh air every day. And so it's beautiful to be with all of you today. I do believe that we're all part of the same family. And in a way, She Changes Climate is also part of Planet Woman. So I'm so glad to see everyone together. I'll keep it very short. My name is Elise Buckle. I'm the president of Climate and Sustainability. We're a small team created after I witnessed the massive fires in Australia. And even if I had been working on climate change for 20 years and reading the IPCC report just to see this massive destruction with my children, I'm also a mother of two. That was really, a mindset shift. And I came back and was like, that's okay, this UN job, it's too slow. I want to create something faster and just bring people together. So our DNA is about radical collaboration, connecting people and organizations who share the same sense of urgency. And we work as a catalyzer. So we connect organizations to form global coalitions to unlock the power of positive action. So we're super happy to focus on She Changes Climate this year. It's very close to my heart also because I was working for Ambassador Khan when she was the chief negotiator for COP23 when Fiji had the presidency. And I was one of her closest advisors. And I saw how hard it was for her, how beautiful she was, because she had this really feminine style of leadership. She was leading with empathy, leading, like listening to everyone and even to Saudi Arabia and building this Talanoa dialogue for a very inclusive and diverse process, which I think is really the key for the systemic transformation that we all want. But I also saw how hard it was, after COP, the prime minister was so jealous that she was basically dismissed. She's okay now, she became the chair of the Human Rights Council, and now she's working in Den Haag. So very, very powerful woman. But I also saw her, rising to the top and also falling after that. And I think that we need to support these very courageous women who are dedicating their lives to this fight for climate, to this fight for humanity, for our survival. And of course, we need to do that together with men. So it's also about reconciling our feminine and masculine energy. We all have it in us, and because, reconnecting with nature. And so I love She Changes Climate because it's a very, very important key to this systemic transformation. If we have 50% of women at all levels of decision making, I think we can really achieve massive changes in the world. And we are starting with the COP presidency team, because it's the, the top of the iceberg. But of course, we need that to happen everywhere, also on board of companies, in parliaments, in governments, everywhere. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, and maybe we can move on to the next question.
Thank you, Elise. Ladies, I don't know how you guys, y'all are feeling, I should say gals, but there's a guy there here too. My heart chakras are on fire because of the brilliance and the talent and the passion that I'm hearing here. So let's keep this going. So I have actually a specific COP question. Let's demystify it a little bit. What is the importance of the annual UN's climate conference? What actually happens there, and why does it impact climate action?
I feel the best person to answer that is Elise. Because
I will start, but I think it's good to.
I'm a newbie.
It's good to hear from everyone, but I've been to, I think, 12 COPs, so there's enough to be disillusioned. Most of them were a disaster, except for Paris, which was a miracle, I think, also because many stars were aligned then, with Barack Obama and many leaders, Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. And obviously, there's been a lot of changes in leadership, and heads of states have been changing. But I think it's so important still to believe in the UN, because even if the UN is not very efficient, it's the only forum we have where all countries are meeting. And there's no way we can tackle climate change on our own, alone at home, or not a single country can tackle climate change. And so I still think that, and especially now, because the world is becoming so fragmented, with COVID-19 and people fighting for access to vaccination, and now the war. The war between Russia and Ukraine is more than just the war in Ukraine. Obviously, it's dividing up the world between the West and the East again. And it's really crazy, because it feels like the history is repeating itself, and we're making the same mistakes over and over again. But we do need this global cooperation now, even more than before. And also because climate change is impacting all of us. There's no discrimination now. We had a massive drought in Europe. There are floods in the US. And also, there are also some rich people who are contributing to climate change in UAE, or, people with a large carbon footprint. So I think it's an issue of climate justice, but that's not just between the North and the South or between countries. It's also within each country, the people who are rich enough, who can afford to pollute the atmosphere, and people who are basically being victimized. And I don't like the word victims, because sometimes I feel as a woman, I'm being the victim of a very patriarchal system, even here in Switzerland. But I wish we could all be actors and actors of change makers. And I do believe that everyone can be a leader, even if a refugee in a refugee camp can become a leader in this community. And that's really the power of getting people together and feeling that we are united, that all of us are human beings. And I think COP is important, because that's the only time in the year when we all come together as humanity, and when we check in terms of where we are. So the Paris Agreement is not perfect, of course, because it's not as legally binding as the Kyoto Protocol, but it's still a check. We have this global stock take taking place. We have scientists from the IPCC telling us where we are in terms of the objective of Paris, the goal, which is staying below 2 or 1.5 degrees of temperature increase. And we have countries submitting nationally determined contribution every 5 years, and also long-term strategies in terms of how we get to carbon neutrality by 2050. So that's still a very important moment, even if there are a lot of geopolitical tensions. And I also think that Egypt is not the best host, and the UAE is not the best host in terms of human rights and women's rights. But we need to be there to make our voices heard. Otherwise, the space will be dominated by fossil fuel industry. And energy in particular is extremely important. Now also with the energy crisis, it's now or never that we need to phase out fossil fuels. The other important issue this year for Egypt and for all of Africa is loss and damage, because where some people are losing their country altogether, including people in the Caribbean or in the Pacific, and they are asking about their future. Are they going to be compensated for that loss? So that's also a very important topic. I would say probably energy and loss and damage are the most important issues for COP. And of course, women leadership, which is part of the leadership crisis.
Elise, thank you. You said something that hit me in terms of you used the word victimize. It's interesting. I think a lot of us, when I look at the faces on this call, individually and as women, every single day we step into our power, right, as individual women. And we're nobody's victim in many ways, right? But here we are systematically, there is a victimization of gender. So balancing that complexity and showing up in that complexity every day, right? To be in your own power, but to also fight the gender discrimination against us. So that really showed up strongly when you said that word for me. So thank you. We'll move on to the next question, which is, we want to hear more about, the COP here and really hearing, my colleagues always participate in COP, and I just never put the two and two together about the underrepresentation of women in marginalized communities at COP. So tell us more about how this issue manifests at the conference and what exactly are you advocating for COP27?
I think maybe I'll start with that just because last year's COP was my first COP, and I was quite interested, and it was a very open COP in terms of COPs, I would say, just because it's very easy. This was post-COVID, so it wasn't easy in that sense, but at least most people are allowed to come into the UK, and protesting was also still allowed on the streets. And what I heard from all sides was that last year's COP really stood out in terms of participation of underrepresented groups, and either they spoke in the blue zone, which was great, and I have to say some of the speeches, so the speeches that stayed in my mind were usually the ones from representatives from typically underrepresented group, just because they were so direct, so fresh, and they really came to the point. And then the camera quite cleverly went into the audience, and you could see world leaders there with the eyes glazing over or eyes closed, as if they weren't being addressed. So I would say it really highlighted this problem between sort of slightly numb Western leaders and people actually affected on the front line. At the same time, I heard already about the very high prices for stands in the blue zone, that it was really, really expensive to participate. And that, for example, the big indigenous community that came from the Amazon could not afford a stand there. And they were therefore dependent on people hosting them and driving them around. And when they came to speak at the She Changes Climate Day at COP, it was almost as if they were lost. It was great. I felt we should be rolling out a red carpet to these people who have clearly shown sustainability leadership by managing 80% of biodiversity that remains on our planet. They are the best professionals in this business. How come we're not rolling out the red carpet? How come they don't have a stand 3 times bigger than Canada to just talk about their practices and to showcase their practices and to also educate us on the way they think and manage things, because we should be learning from them. It's difficult whether these are men or women, doesn't matter. It's more about simply regaining respect. I think there's a real loss of respect between those that lead the country in terms of governance. These are politicians, and I think there's even a disconnect between politicians and governance now. I mean, we see that in the UK, where our new Prime Minister, a woman, so we should be really hopeful, obviously, that she, becomes an expert in the issues that really matter and leads this country out of the crisis. But at the same time, she isn't grasping the issues. She doesn't understand that climate action is required right now. And she doesn't seem to want to govern in the way that we need to be governed. So, and what I hear from other countries like Brazil is the people that there have spoken about the indigenous people as the children, without the respect that is really due. So for me, a question is very much about how we can reestablish a respect. And what we're trying to do is team up existing world leaders that are recognized, that are respected, like, former heads of governments like Mary Robinson, leading scientists, leading business people, with the marginalized people together, so that when we shine a light on them, it's also more obvious to world leaders, perhaps, and the delegates at COP, that we actually need to listen to the people on the ground.
Bianca, it's interesting to hear that the economic, structural, and social barriers to full participation, and the fact, again, that nobody has ever taken a lens to, oh, this is for real, and how do I fix it? And it's ongoing. So then going back to this year, if not enough progress is made on gender equity or on strengthening climate commitments, what's the roadmap to change? How do you see she changes climate future work in this space? What do you think is the call to action, the next call to action?
I think that just because this is sort of the second year of our operation, and we're obviously also thinking about the next year, my conclusion after more than 10 years of working on environmental issues is that governments are failing us dramatically, and businesses are failing us as well. So what we have to do is simply build our own structures. We cannot wait for these apparent leaders to have a change in mind. We need to build our own structures right now. And this is what we're doing with an Ambition Leaders Summit that we are hosting on the 4th of November. We brought it forward to start before COP and to be able to then send a strong message to the leaders gathering at Sharm el-Sheikh the following week, really showcasing what ambition actually means. Because current world leaders' ambition is climate chaos by 2030. They are continuing to invest in fossil fuel exploration. And we need to show that there is an alternative vision for 2030, and we need to talk about the action we have to take right now.
Also, what we're asking for COP and for the next COPs is two co-chairs, a co-presidency, a man and a woman together at the top. The UN is very good at doing that for most of the negotiation tracks. For example, when you have a negotiation on finance, they appoint two co-chairs, and usually they are very sensitive about having a co-chair from the north and a co-chair from the south. So what we're saying is, why not having a man and a woman as well? And the other thing is, of course, we would like the presidency to lead by example. So we are asking Egypt to have 50% of women on the team of the presidency. And we think that it could inspire countries to do the same, because country delegations are still also male dominated. Only about a third or even less are women. And heads of delegation in particular are men, especially when they are ministers. Often the ministers are men. So ideally, we would like to ask all parties attending COP to have 50% of women on their delegations, and make sure they rotate every year, or they have co-chairs, but making sure they also have 50% of heads of delegation as women. The other things we're asking, which is listed in the letter that I think Antoinette already shared in the chat, is number one is on content, and not just on the process, is the phase out of fossil fuels. Again, this is so urgent. We are on our way to +3 or +4 degrees, and we can't just keep burning fossil fuel. I think Antonio Guterres was very clear we need to stop this war against nature. You know, he was in Pakistan with millions of people being affected by the flood, 1/3 of the country underwater. And there are still 60 banks today in the world investing $760 billion a year in new fossil fuel infrastructure. So I think there's also something where, you know, we talk about ESG and reporting, and there's a lot of greenwashing, and that needs to stop also the investment. The second thing we're asking is to mainstream gender into NDCs, into nationally determined contribution, because we feel women should be part of the transformation in all sectors of the economy, and the NDC should cover all sectors: energy, food, transport, forest, nature. And finance also is very important. I think it's in the US, where only 2% of climate finance is going to women, because there are very few women also in the finance industry. So in a way, you should have a gender lens on all financial flows and on all climate finance, the same way you have now an ESG lens on finance. The other thing is we want women to be at the table on peace negotiations. It's slightly outside UNFCCC, but it's so important right now. When you see images of negotiations in Ukraine, it's all men in their military suit. There's absolutely no woman. When the World Economic Forum has made the case that when women are at the table, first you have better chance of reaching an agreement, a peace agreement, but also you have more chance for this agreement to last in the long term. So these are our policy asks. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. And I would love Caroline also to answer the question on why COP27 is important.
Thank you so much, Elise. You know, I was going to put my hand up. I also wanted to say specifically to you, Hazel, that, you know, it's for us, it's people like us from small islands. We have a voice in the COP like we do nowhere else. And I think it's really important to emphasize that small islands like Seychelles, like Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm from, have really driven forward the negotiations, and not single-handedly, because we've had our allies, we've had so many allies, but I think it's really important that even though we're very small, we contribute to less than 1.1% of the emissions globally. I think it's something ridiculous like 0.3 or 0.5, or maybe even less, that we suffer, disproportionately. And it's not just from the hurricanes and the rebuilding, but so many things. To go into a list right now would just take up time. But I think it's a great place for the global South, for the minorities of the world on the world stage, the Haitis of the world, the Trinidad and Tobagos of the world, the Seychelles of the world, the islands that are slowly sinking in the Pacific where the sea level rise, it's just a couple of feet above water. So it's really important. It might be our only donkey getting us there, but it is still a very important donkey, the COP process. And while it is frustrating and creaky and burdensome and just completely bedecked with red tape, it has been such an important platform for the historically oppressed of the world to speak up and speak loud and be heard. And so I just want to say that as loss and damage. I mean, Pakistan is still underwater. We mentioned Cuba, I don't think we mentioned Puerto Rico, but this year we're seeing a lot of loss and damage play out in real time, and it's not getting as much airplay. And that's really sad, because as we go down to COP, this is what is at stake. Lives are at stake. Loss and damage is a beautiful term that sounds so vague, but what it is this is what I was getting at. It's the rain coming into your house and sweeping everything away. Who's going to pay for that? And I can tell you around the corner, that's a middle income society. That's, probably one car in the household. That's, people struggling to put food on the table and deal with the car that has to go all the way through traffic. And, this is gonna break them for the year. This is gonna break those families.
Yeah.
So that's what's at stake right now.
Thank you for that. I do want to let our participant ask questions. So I'm going to do a quick round robin with all three of you and ask the question, what gives you hope that we will solve the issue of gender inequalities and climate change? Caroline, let's start with you since you have the mic.
The women on the ground making decisions and sacrifices for their community. There's this saying, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. Okay, so now we know. Now we know that this is the case. Now we know what we have to do. Who's going to do the hard work? It's these women on the ground. It's not top down from governments or intergovernmentals. It's the women on the ground who just get up every day and literally and figuratively chop wood and carry water. They give me hope watching the women that I'm working with in, for example, the Maroon groups. These are grandmothers, these are mothers, these are women who have been through difficult times, standing up, speaking up, talking about their sovereignty, talking about their climate justice. They don't have to do this. They could easily go and look after their grandchildren. They don't, but they want to. This was what gives me hope. Just like even when it feels hopeless, you just get up every day and you keep on going.
Thank you. Bianca and then Elise.
Yeah, I mean, totally agreeing with Caroline. What gives me hope is the women. What gives me hope are campaigns like ours, and people supporting these campaigns gives me hope. Because if people start understanding the intersectionality and the interconnectedness between our environmental, social, and economic systems, then we are a great step ahead of the game. In every challenge lies opportunity as well. So I think we have a massive opportunity if we start investing in women-led teams. If we start putting our money towards them, then I think we will see a massive acceleration of the right type of climate action that we want to see right now. And I think there was a comparison between, well, there was some research recently on why did Homo sapiens outperform the Neanderthals, and I thought, well, probably they had sharper elbows and were more pushy or bossy, but actually it turns out that sapiens, they think, was simply much better at communicating and reaching out beyond their own community. They were good at building networks, and they cared for their elders and for the young. So it was actually their soft skills that made them survive other periods of climate change. And I thought, well, that's us. That describes us women. We're good at building communities. We're good at communicating. We're good at reaching out. And that is what gives me hope, that actually we have the right skill set to survive this coming age of disruption, essentially. We are equipped.
Thank you, Bianca. Elise?
Thank you so much. I'm not always optimistic, but I must say we have no choice. We can't fall into eco-anxiety and depression, even for our children. We have to stay hopeful. And I remember Emmanuel Faber, he has this shirt in New York for the Climate Action Summit with a big sign, stubborn optimism. And I know Christiana Figueres is also talking about outraged optimism. And I do think that we have to stay optimistic because actually all the solutions are there. We know what we need to do. We know we have to scale up renewable energy, saving energy as well, investing in trees, in forests, in ecosystems, restoring the oceans. It's so important as well. Decarbonizing transport, better buildings, better cities, decarbonizing transport. We know how to do it. All the solutions are there. It's just a matter of political will and finance to scale it up, to go much faster because time is running out. And what gives me hope is actually to see all these women together, because I think together we have this political will. We can make change happen and we are unstoppable. Nobody can stop us. I think it's so strong. It's in our DNA also as mothers or as children of the earth as well. And I think together we are creating this global movement, and it's us, but it's also we're part of bigger movement for change. There are also lots of citizens, lots of kids on the street asking for the same thing. So we need to stay united and keep pushing for this change, and it will happen. I don't know if it will happen fast enough, but we have to go as fast as possible to avoid a massive disaster for humanity. And so yes, I think together we can, I think when you have women working together, you can really make some miracles happen. And in a way, this letter that Antoinette was spearheading was an example of that. And we can make more miracles happen by working together and just being like, you know, a drop of water. Together we can create a river of change and an ocean of change. And this river is watering the plants and blooming flowers and restoring the forest. So so this is what gives me hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. And the three of you give me hope, and I agree, and everybody on this call, there's no way you can't walk away with feeling something change within you and that you want to do more on this issue. So with that, Joanna, we already, she's going to moderate the question.
Yes. I know we just have a couple minutes, but I do want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. There are some in the chat, but I don't know if you want to ask a question. I see Umida had one here. Umida, would you like to unmute and ask your question, or do you want me to read it from the chat?
Good morning. Hi, everyone. Sorry, my camera is not working. It's on the Zoom. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate everybody taking the time, and looks like this is a great initiative I have been following for a while. I am part of clean energy startup, and I have seen all the challenges what clean technology companies are facing, in particular early stage and growth stage. So 2 years ago, I was looking into how we can really accelerate the process for funding clean tech companies. I read through policies of World Economic Forum, United Nations, and there was not much useful resources for, in particular, early stage growth stage companies that are developing great solutions to, you know, to reverse climate change. Without innovation, we cannot really make an impact. So I'm building a platform from technical. It is an online marketplace, actually helps promotes global clean technology companies globally. And I have 5 pillars for the company, which I am planning to execute. One is also exhibition, focusing on innovation showcase, and then slowly partnering with governments and bring new technologies into different countries. So I'm looking for collaboration, for building advisory board, looking for mentorship, different kinds of opportunities. And then I am just looking, what is the best way for all of us to, you know, to help each other, to contribute to each other's projects, and, you know, whatever we are working on to our goal is from the large theme. I think we are fighting against climate change, and we definitely want to end political wars, right? At the end of the day, peace is very important. And I grew up I am from Uzbekistan. I grew up from age 7 in farm fields planting cotton. So I know all the challenges, and my mom lives kind of in a village where she doesn't have access for energy, electricity, like 24-hour we have in United States, or she doesn't have clean water, access for clean water. So I am, in a long term, my goal is to kind of help countries step by step by bringing innovation, you know, solutions. As you said, solutions available. And I have built huge database of companies in that they are solving climate change. So, so now the idea is how I can take this to next level. And I'm looking for support, collaboration, and, you know, some of the great minds like yours coming on board. Yeah, and then I can do the same support to your organizations. I would be happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mida. Elise, did you want to respond?
Yes, thank you so much, Omida. I think you could do exactly what Bianca did in the UK. She started this Women for the Environment WhatsApp group. Simple idea, but it's been growing so much, and now it's actually going beyond the UK. So I think anywhere where you are, you can set up a community group with other women who are sharing the same interest as you. And this is going to be very powerful. And of course, meeting them in person is great. If you can host a kind of a circle of trust or a dialogue with them, or screen a film, you can use our theme, She Changes Climate theme, or anything else. I think in your community, you can do a lot to have this support mechanism with people around you. And then I just have a very specific idea for you, because we know this woman, Juliana, who is managing a big network of women in technology. And it's called One Up, One Down. And they do a lot of mentoring for women in the space of technology, which is actually quite male dominated. So I would be happy to connect you with her to see if she has some ideas. She's also actually one of our mentors. We have a new mentoring program called B1, and it's just starting. Actually, Antoinette is also a mentor. It's full right now, and Juliana is one of the mentors, but I'm sure she would be happy to speak to you even without being on the program.
Sure, I would be happy to follow up, and I'm open to, after follow-up conversation with everyone here who's interested. Yeah.
Can I also say, I completely echo what Elise said, and that is a fantastic way. Also, think about doing things, as you said, Elise, in person as well, and think about the best social media, because, for example, LinkedIn isn't huge in Trinidad. I mean, it is from a working way, but like social media, like Facebook is for a certain age, and a certain age of women will use Facebook as opposed to something like Instagram that would be younger women. And I know in developing countries, social media has its own life. And so WhatsApp is really, really big in Trinidad. So start on WhatsApp, start on Facebook, figure out who your target demographic is. If it's women like you, you know what you use, I just wanted to
Thank you, Caroline. All right, we're right at time. If somebody has one other question, they can ask it, but I would also love to ask everyone who's still here and access to the chat, drop into the chat a takeaway from the event. What are you walking away with today? Is there a phrase that jumped out at you or something that you learned? That would be really enriching for all of us to be able to see that. So anybody else have one last question they want to sneak in? Otherwise, we can wrap. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate it. Amazing. Thank you so much to Elise and Caroline and Bianca and Antoinette for being here today. And thank you, Hazel. This was so inspiring, fired up. We will send a follow-up email with the recording to the event, as well as resources, web links, all of that sort of stuff. So keep your eye on your email. And if you want to share this with anyone, the recording will be on YouTube, so you can pass it on. Thanks, everyone, for coming. We'll unmute you if you want to say goodbye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night. Good night to all our UK
Thank you.
friends. Bye.
Bye.